Ignacio Ramonet, My Life, a Spoken Autobiography. Embark on a captivating journey through the life of Fidel Castro, the iconic Cuban revolutionary leader, in My Life, a Spoken Autobiography written by Ignacio Ramonet. This book summary delves into Castro's early years, including his humble beginnings in rural Cuba, the political awakening he experienced during his university years, and his unwavering determination to liberate Cuba from an unjust political system and economic disparity. As you explore the various stages of Castro's life, from organizing armed assaults to implementing social reforms in Cuba, you'll gain insights into his motivations, personal beliefs, and the challenges faced by this enigmatic leader.
Fidel Castro's childhood. Fidel Castro, son of a wealthy sugarcane plantation owner and a native Cuban mother, grew up in Byron, a backwater village in eastern Cuba. From a young age, he rebelled against authority and was deeply moved by the poverty surrounding him. He received his education in Santiago de Cuba and later attended the Colegio de Bullen in Havana, where he participated in sports and enjoyed mountain climbing. The Revolutionary Road of Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro's journey from law student to revolutionary leader, and how he initiated the fight against Batista's repressive regime. In the book, the author reveals Fidel Castro's fascinating journey from studying law to becoming a revolutionary leader in Cuba. Despite being on a conservative campus, Castro became an avid Marxist-Leninist and a revolutionary, who followed Eduardo Chivas, and joined the cause opposing Cuba's brutal dictator, Fulgencio Batista. Castro's growing unease with Cuba's economic structure, which kept peasants in poverty, fueled his hatred for Batista and his repressive regime. He eventually decided to take drastic measures to uproot the political and economic system that he found unjust. In July 1953, Castro and his men organized and led an armed assault on the Moncada barracks in hopes of catalyzing a national uprising against Batista. Although Castro and his men lost the battle, it was a defining moment in Cuba's history, as it signaled the beginning of the end of Batista's regime. The narrative shows how Castro was a remarkable visionary who seemed bent on creating something new for Cuba and bringing an end to the repressive Batista regime, which he believed exploited the poor. His journey was, however, fraught with challenges, including capture by Batista's forces, torture, and execution of his fellow combatants. It was a defining moment in his career, but he managed to escape execution and, with the help of a Cuban army lieutenant, went underground. The book concludes with an insight into the exceptional personality of Fidel Castro. As he himself states, his character was molded by the hard tests he had to pass and the conflicts he had to face. These experiences shaped his worldview and transformed him into an unwavering resistance fighter who remained committed to his ideals till the end. Through brilliant storytelling, the author presents a compelling and insightful narrative that captures Castro's revolutionary journey while delivering key insights about the revolutionary struggle that began in Cuba in the early 1950s. The rise of Fidel Castro. Imprisonment, guerrilla warfare, and revolution led Fidel Castro to the top of Cuba's government. After serving time and going into exile in Mexico, Castro met Che Guevara and gathered a team of skilled guerrilla fighters. They planned to take down Batista's army with guerrilla tactics, and in November of 1956, they sailed to Cuba with 79 heavily armed men. After a dramatic firefight, the rebels organized into separate guerrilla fronts and launched continuous attacks on the government forces. Despite facing countless challenges, they eventually had Batista and his entire military on the run. In January 1959, Batista fled Cuba, and Castro and his rebels took control of the government, marking the beginning of a new era in Cuban history. America's fight against Cuba. From the time he took power, Fidel Castro faced opposition from the United States who were determined to stop his regime. The CIA, under President Eisenhower's approval, conducted covert operations against Castro, including terror attacks and support for anti-Castro organizations. The Bay of Pigs attack failed, and President Kennedy then imposed a trade and economic embargo on Cuba and approved Operation Mongoose, which was notorious for its efforts to disrupt Cuba's economy. Between 1961 and 1963, the United States carried out almost 6,000 terror attacks against Cuba. All these efforts were part of America's desire to stop the spread of communism in the hemisphere and block the influence of revolutionary ideas. The Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1962, the Soviet Union installed missiles in Cuba to protect themselves from a perceived American invasion. Kennedy ordered a naval blockade of Cuba, and Castro prepared for war. But a deal was reached between the US and the USSR for the removal of missiles from Cuba and Turkey to avoid nuclear war. Castro's proposal for a nuclear first strike was deemed immoral by Khrushchev. In 1962, the United States was preparing for a massive invasion of Cuba, but the Soviet Union intercepted this information and warned Cuba. In response, Cuba allowed the USSR to install medium-range missiles in their country to protect themselves. Kennedy, who learned about the missile installation, demanded the immediate removal of the missiles or risk nuclear war. To avoid conflict, the Russians agreed to withdraw their missiles if the US agreed to certain conditions. These included the US withdrawing their missile installations in Turkey, agreeing not to invade Cuba, and ending the naval blockade. At the same time, Castro was prepared for war and proposed a nuclear first strike against the US. However, Khrushchev deemed this proposal immoral and warned Castro of the implications of such an action. In the end, an agreement was reached between the US and USSR, and the missiles were removed, averting a potential nuclear catastrophe. This event became known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuban immigration to the United States. Since the Cuban Revolution, Cubans have been fleeing to the United States seeking asylum. With the help of the Cuban Adjustment Act, many Cubans have been able to enter the United States via illegal immigration. The opening of Mariel Harbor by Castro in 1980 caused the Mariel boat lift, resulting in more than 125,000 Cubans migrating to Miami during President Carter's administration. Thousands of Cubans made their way to the United States on homemade rafts and many died at sea. Today, the wet foot, dry foot policy allows Cubans who make it to U.S. soil the opportunity to stay and apply for citizenship, while those interdicted at sea are immediately returned. Cuba's achievements. Fidel Castro is proud of what Cuba has achieved since 1959. The regime has given seized land to campesinos and provided basic industries and natural resources to the people. Illiteracy has been eliminated, and more Cuban children stay in school through the 9th grade than any other country. Cuba has the most doctors and teachers per capita, and education from preschool to doctoral programs is free. The infant mortality rate is low, and life expectancy has increased by more than 15 years. Nearly 9 out of 10 Cubans own their homes tax-free.
In My Life, a Spoken Autobiography, Ignacio Ramonet provides a comprehensive and insightful examination of Fidel Castro's life and his ultimate impact on Cuba. The book offers a vivid portrayal of the legendary leader's path from his early struggle against injustice to his eventual rise to power and the subsequent establishment of a new social order in Cuba. Major highlights from the book include the unsuccessful Moncada barracks assault, Castro's eventual ascent to power, the Cuban Revolution, and the numerous conflicts with the United States. Overall, Ramonet's detailed account of Castro's unique journey offers readers an unparalleled understanding of the man behind the revolutionary legend and the immense challenges he faced throughout his life.